Okay, guys, I'm going to make this an asynchronous assignment. I suggest you probably want to do this prior to a open book test that is going to be counted as an assignment, so that you have plenty of time to do that. So you might as well watch this first. It's not going to answer all of your questions, but it will answer certainly some. So this is really kind of a bit of hemodynamics. And specifically the carotid. Exam. Okay, so let's remind ourselves of basic anatomy first. Carotid exam. There are parts here that we don't see. For instance, this entire aortic arch. I'm going to move in a little bit more for me to write clearly. So this is the, I'm just going to write arch. That comes all the way around. Actually, it's not use the arrow at that end. Let's make sure we understand the direction of travel. I'm sure you already do. Now, on the right side, and only on the right side, in the vast majority of people, sorry, I have someone showing up at my door. I'm going to put this on pause. Actually, the person has not shown up yet, but my dogs know someone is going to show up because my wife is walking around spraying air freshener in our stinky house, wiping things down, putting things away. Very obvious signs that someone very important is showing up. Anyhow, let me go ahead and get started again until the next time they bark. All right, so I was saying the vast majority of people basically we'll just say this is normal anatomy. Well, it is normal anatomy. Have the innominate, also called brachycephalic arteries. It's only on the right side. I remember when we were scanning, we would bring our transducer down quite low and transverse. And if you got it down low enough, you would see a little bit of that brachiocephalic artery. So the first thing that comes off, of course, is the common, every time, Perch, common carotid artery. And well, that'll be here and over here as well. And of course we have, anywhere in here is prox, mid, and distal, right before the bulb. So that's all CCA, common carotid artery. And if we're doing the exam, that's kind of where we start usually. Some people start on, well, let's go ahead and write. Subclavian starts right there. It starts when the common carotid artery comes off. Of course, that's going to feed the arm. Then we run into the bulb. And two arteries come off the bulb. Let's start with the minor artery, the one we don't particularly care about. This is the ECA, external carotid artery. And of course, it's usually more medial, which is kind of goes against what you would think. External, you would think it would be more external. but it's usually more medial. Can't use that alone to determine which is which. We have to look at other things such as the size, which I've clearly drawn differently. The first artery that comes off, you should know, superior thyroid artery. That's the superior thyroid artery. And then, of course, we have the ICA, and that's prox mid, and hopefully we'll get up to here for distal. So unfortunately with the ICA, oftentimes our prox mid and distal are all within a couple of centimeters of each other, and we always try to make that as long as possible. However, most plaque does occur, let's see, right about in that area. So chances are, if they have plaque, that is where we're going to see it. So I am going, by the way, in pretty much in order of what I do. We'll just do proximal only on the ECA. So proximal, mid, distal, bulb, and of course we're doing sagittal, transverse, we're doing color Doppler, spectral Doppler, except I don't spectral the bulb unless needed. Proximal ECA, and then I'm done with that, and then I do proximal, mid, and distal ICA, sagittal and transverse. After I'm done with the carotid, I look at the excuse me, vertebral artery in one spot only. On some people, I might look at it proximally. Some other people, I might be somewhere mid. But as you know, up here, it is shadowed. So we oftentimes only see, well, we always see just little short bits of the vertebral artery. Excuse me. The most important aspect of the vertebral artery to note is a direction of flow. Now, reversal in the direction of flow more often occurs on the left side, but not always. It can occur on the right side as well. And of course, that goes back to the bunny sign, but it's also called the subclavian steal. So let's go ahead and talk about a subclavian steal right now. What happens with that? Well, with a subclavian steal, you notice how I said there are certain places where people get plaque. We don't get plaque in our arms. We very rarely do anyway. It's an unusual place. We do get plaque at the beginnings of arteries, and the bulb could also be considered a beginning of an artery. That's one location. And so the subclavian comes off the aortic arch here, and for some reason that is a location for plaque buildup. Without getting too much into this right now, because I think I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to talk about this with the other. Well, I will talk about this with another talk, but so I'll just give you the abbreviated version, Bernoulli. Conservation of energy. When kinetic energy, that is the energy of motion, when that goes up, it has to take energy from somewhere else. It cannot simply increase in kinetic energy without taking that energy from somewhere else. So it's going to take it from pressure, as in millimeters mercury. Pressure goes down. Pressure, I want my pretty green, and I always forget. Pressure in the stenosis, or just after the stenosis, drops because of the velocity is very, let's write that down. A jet is formed. It's fast. By being fast, it drops the pressure right here in the green circle. And then what happens? Now, the blood pressure, the millimeters mercury up here is greater than it is down here. What happens when you have a pressure differential, delta P differential in pressure, its blood's going to be pushed down. So if you have a complete subclavian steel, that just simply means that this is no longer a stenosis, it's an absolute obstruction, and then simply Bernoulli doesn't matter anymore. It's just simply reversal of flow, perfect reversal of flow. But in a subclavian steel where it's not a full steel, it's a partial steel, like I've drawn here, this occurs. And we normally think, when we look at a pressure wave of ultrasound, well, a velocity wave, really, I should say. This is velocity of blood. We normally think of this as peak systole. Anyway, sorry, my dogs are at it again. We normally think of that as peak systole when in the vast majority of cases, and I have to put pause again. And so it was only the mailman, but they're so jacked up that the slightest noise is getting them to go crazy. All right, so like I said, we normally think of that as peak systole, but in this case, what's going on is the velocity is increasing during systole. It increases to a certain point where the velocity is such that the pressure has dropped, and then there's a very fast reversal of flow. And so this is no longer peak systole. This is. But just remember, this is an unusual situation. By the vast majority of time, this is not going to show up in not only the neck or in other parts of the body, but it is always a possibility. But okay, so that's this is subclavian. Steel, a complete is just simply reversal of flow. There is no Bernoulli, it's just simply the flow is reversed. It goes down and across out to the arm. Essentially, the contralateral vertebral artery is stealing, is going across and actually stealing from the base of your brain. So yeah, it's not good for you. And then a partial steal, this here shows a partial steel. Okay. Okay, let me back up here. Come across. So I drawed a carotid artery here, anechoic lumen like we would normally see. And well, what are some of the things that we could look at with this? So I've made the wall, certainly the tunica adventitia, more of a, it's supposed to be echogenic, of course, but remember that's something also, that's actually something we do need to talk about. Let's do this real quick. We do have different tunics. Let's say that's the tunica intima, the innermost wall. Tunica media is hypoechoic, and we could see that on people, the healthy and the unhealthy, we can see. And then, of course, there's an outer wall, which would be echogenic, which I can't quite draw. Well, you know what, let's at least, I'll use an echogenic pen, right? Well, not 100% accurate in how I've drawn that, but that's okay. Intima. Media. Adventitia. Okay, when we develop plaque, it is underneath the intima. Actually, I'll start before I say plaque. When we get intima media thickness increase, so that's for the carotid, C-I-M-T, intima media thickness, carotid intima media thickness. I don't know the specific numbers, nor do I care to know them. I kind of know it when I see it, and I could always go back and look at expected CIMTs per age group. So CIMT is just overall thickening, although usually it'd be more of a universal all around the circumference thickening. Although certainly it could have localized thickening. So that's kind of a pre-plaque situation. And then plaque, let's just fill it in with a color here. Plaque is fat cells. Well, it's actually white blood cells that have sucked up lipids. So they've kind of created a fatty substance, but they're actually white blood cells. So white blood cells, why white blood cells? Because it's an area of irritation that causes this to begin with. Plaque is alive, by the way. Let's just keep that in mind. It is a living structure. It is a living tissue. It can die, and in which case pieces may be more likely to break off. But it is living tissue underneath the intima layer. Now, having said that, that intima doesn't usually stay particularly tiny. It will form, and hopefully actually will form, a capsule over the top. That capsule does actually keep the plaque from breaking off and causing a stroke. All right. So what else do I want to talk about with this? So we could measure, let's zoom in on this. Oh, okay, now they are truly here. I have to pause one more time. Okay, where were we? Talking a little bit about plaque. And of course, if let's go ahead and draw some, what color plaque shall we have? Let's make it salmon. Plaque oftentimes will develop here, around here. And remember, when we're seeing it like this, we're actually seeing, if we could see the circumferential diameter there. What's actually going on is plaque might be thicker right here and thinner in here, but still it's all one, really one big plaque. It's just around. And so that's what we're seeing up here. Like that, and perhaps a little bit over here. And so, of course, with our exam, let's just remind ourselves what we do for these exams. Use some funny colors here. We'll do spectrals, grayscale, color, spectral. We'll do transverse imaging. Let's see, I think I'll still, whoops. Now change my direction. That's probably, when we get up to here, it's probably the easier thing to do. And certainly on most people, the vessels start to die. So, you know, with plaque in the bulb, you may want to scan there. Personally, I still wouldn't, unless it was really bad plaque. Definitely, though, I'm going to scan right there and see what that velocity is. Oh, I know what I wanted to do. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about, but we'll go back to that. So this is the most important one. And I always suggest that you walk it through. Walking it through means that you are holding your hand steady, and with your left hand, you're taking the trackball and you're literally moving this. You're moving this a little bit this way, a little bit that way, a little bit up, a little bit down, and you're finding that point. And at some point, you will find the highest velocities. And remember, when we talk about velocity, that is the gold standard for determining the amount of stenosis. Visually, it is usually quite hard to get a very good visual. Yeah, you can. I won't say usually, but oftentimes it's quite hard visually to understand exactly how much stenosis it is. Let's see, I had that guy there, which I'm actually quite proud of. But let me come back. Let me come back to this guy. I forgot that I wanted to talk to you guys about waveforms. So, do we have, how much room do we have here? Erase. Well, let's pause it while I'm erasing. Okay, well, let's work up, not necessarily in the order of an exam. But I have here, this first vessel here is, of course, the vertebral artery. The vertebral artery feeds the brain. The brain wants blood. Now, It also suffers from Poiseuille's law. The volume flow is less. So when you go from a carotid and swing over to the vertebral, they should both be traveling in the same direction. Of course, that's number one thing to look at with vertebral. But you'll notice that the vertebral waveform is much smaller. And that's simply because it is slower. It's a thinner vessel. Poiseuille's law says that a thinner vessel will reduce the volume flow. Okay, so, and we'll talk about Poiseuille's law as well. So let's just kind of do a typical flow there. So this is similar, not to the carotid necessarily. This is similar, this is vert, but it's going to be a little bit dissimilar to the carotid. Why? Because the carotid feeds a brain and it also feeds the muscle and the skull and everything else through the two arteries. So the carotid artery, I find this to be a little bit different in different people. So, but it's going to be, there's still forward flow, but it's not as much. So vertebral is definitely a low resistance blood flow. How do we know that? Because there's plenty of flow in end diastole. The CCA, you know, it should be somewhat low resistance, but so often I find it to be kind of a high resistance flow, which is surprising, but that's just the way it is. So we're going to call this mid or middle resistance, we'll call it that. So that's a typical waveform for there. And it's, oh, by the way, it's probably around 100 centimeters per second, more or less, give or take. It really doesn't matter as long as it doesn't deviate too much from that. Whereas the vertebral, I'm just going to guess. I actually don't know off the top of my head. Let me just say it's like 50. Okay. Now, come up. Let's look at this ICA first. That feeds the brain. It's going to have a waveform that looks similar to this. Okay. Should be a little bit higher velocities though, because it's. I made that really low resistance, but that's good. That means this person is alive and thinking. Incidentally, brain dead people have very different ICA flows, but let's not get into that. The ECA, however, okay, let's write this down again. Low resistance. The ECA, however, is going to have maybe no flow, maybe a tiny bit of flow. That is high we know it's high resistance by looking at end diastole. Okay, end diastole. There is differences in different people on just how resistive each one of these arteries is. So we don't need to get too caught up, but it is a helpful thing to know the different resistances. Okay. In fact, let's come back to here. The waveform here very well could be, so here's your baseline. And then here, the waveform is pretty much good. It doesn't look like, I have not drawn a terrible stenosis, so let's just so still a low resistance flow. There's going to be some turbulence. But for the most part, we still have a recognizable flow pattern. Now, things can get a lot worse. Let's actually draw that down here. Let's draw the worst of the worst down here. Let's put in okay. Let's put in something a little, not quite at the very beginning. We're going to put this one a little farther down. In fact, this one is almost occlusion. So we're talking about like 95% here. The blood is just firing through here at super high speed. And of course, there's going to be aliasing and everything. I won't draw that in right now. And then terrible turbulence here. Now we have a couple of different waveforms to think about. Let's talk about post-stenotic, because that one you'll be most familiar with. Black. Oops. I'm going to draw that like that, because that's how those are. And then I'll go ahead and draw my angle correct in there. Okay. Post-stenotically, well, we can have, if we're really close, let's see, really close, within a few to several centimeters of the stenosis, you will still have turbulence. But this change in inertia, so when we talk about stealing energy from the system, there's friction, like wall friction along the wall. There's viscosity. A higher viscosity steals more energy. And then changes in inertia. And that it could be a speeding up or slowing down, changes in the inertia, changes in basically your overall velocity can and will suck energy from the system. So what does that mean as far as our waveform goes? I just can't stand to look at that. Okay. So a loss of inertia means a loss of inertia. It can't produce that fast velocity change. It doesn't look like this anymore. It's a slow velocity. In fact, we can measure that as acceleration time. Time between beginning of systole and the end of systole. But of course, we know this as tardus parvis. Tardus parvis oftentimes will be associated with a complete fill-in, which is suggestive of turbulence. Turbulence could also be seen like just real fuzzy on top too. So we'll go kind of draw that as well. All right. So that's a post-stenotic. At the stenosis itself, well, you may have velocities. I'm not going to draw it. I'm just going to write this. Velocities. I'm just going to say greatly increased, as in 400, 500, 600 centimeters per second. And it's going to sound like, it sounds like air being suddenly being released from a tire. That's what it sounds like on Doppler. Now there's one waveform that's a little harder to predict. On a severe stenosis or a full stenosis, a complete occlusion, we can get a pre-stenotic waveform. We're expecting low resistance flow. Well, with this much of a what shall I call it? Resistance for blood to go through, it's no longer going to be low resistance flow. It's going to have a certain look to it. Some people call that like a wall thump or a water hammer. Either way, this is blood trying to go forward and for the most part failing, although you can see that it looks like it might be going a little bit forward. But there's no end diastole shown, or actually, this is like, you know what, let me be a little more clear. This would be like a good, this is a pre-occlusion, before the occlusion. And then the other possibility is, let's draw another one. That's still going to be the same type of thing. A reversal flow where you might not normally expect a reversal flow. Forward flow, but not a whole lot of forward flow. Well, you could imagine it's just not a whole lot of blood is making it through entirely. So that would be like a pre-stenotic blood flow. Okay. We need to talk about the determining severity of stenosis in the carotid system. And there's a chart for that. Let me draw that chart out. Okay, well, I was going to draw it out. That was stupid. I just took a picture of it. Okay. So consensus panel grayscale and Doppler US criteria for diagnosis of the ICA. This is the consensus CRU table. Anyway, so how we read this. If my ICA peak systolic velocity is less than 125, and I don't, this is my Doppler in this plaque estimate. So let's do, of course, this is Doppler. That was just horrible, wasn't it? First one is capital D. this is, okay. Less than 125, nothing seen. We don't even need additional parameters, but if I did, the ICA divided by CCA, peak systolic velocity ratios, is less than 2. Well, it's most likely going to be considerably less than 2, if that's the case. In the ICA end diastolic velocity, now that's not just anywhere, that's of course at stenosis. At the stenosis we're looking at there. So in any case, we find all those parameters, we have normal. We find a peak systolic velocity still under 125. We now see some plaque, but it seems like it's less than 50%. The ICA-CCA ratio, that is the ICA stenosis, so at the stenosis divided by CCA, usually, preferentially, distal. Doesn't have to be distal. In fact, if the distal CCA has a stenosis as well, you're not, well, let's think about that. If there's a stenosis at the distal CCA, yeah, no, it's pretty much always going to be distal CCA. Because we don't care about the proximal to the ICA, or the mid to the ICA. We want to compare as close as possible, close in proximity as possible. So let's see, less than 125, plaque is less than 50. It's still less than 2, and end diastolic velocity is still less than 40. So we have a rather mild case here. This person is not going to die anytime soon, unless the whole piece breaks off. But that's not likely. Okay, 50 to 69%. Well, how do we determine that? The velocity at the stenosis, these are all stenosis, by the way. This has got to be, unless there is no stenosis, like here, there's no stenosis, so you just take it, whatever, take it. But we're interested in the stenotic velocities, right? We're not interested in the post-stent. As far as this table goes, we're looking at the stenotics. So peak velocity that you can find is somewhere between 125 and 230. The plaque is around 50. Peaks, the ICA-CCA ratio of those peak systolic velocities is now greater than 2, less than 4. The end diastolic velocity of the ICA is greater than 40, less than 100. Then we say it's a 50 to 69%. And you will have this on your wall, by the way. You're not going to ever memorize this. Maybe you will. Greater than or equal to 70%, less than near occlusion. Why? Because at some point, the percentages are very hard to determine. Peak systolic velocity in the ICA, greater than 230. Like I said, you could find velocities in the 600s. That's probably near occlusion, but in any case, plaque estimate is certainly greater than 50%. Maybe it's 75%. Maybe it's 60%, whatever. ICA, CCA ratio is now greater than 4. So that's a pretty big difference. So that means the velocity in the CCA was considerably different than the ICA. The ICA is going much faster than the CCA at this point. In fact, it's going so fast that the end diastolic velocity continues to squeeze through at over 100 centimeters per second. Remember, this is the normal velocity for peak systole, and now its end diastole is 100. Near occlusion, it can be extremely high. Bernoulli, it could, let's do another color here. Extremely high, Bernoulli, 600 centimeters per second, or it can be extremely low, Poisson. The blood at some point, the friction of the walls and the very small diameter can eventually slow things down. So that's more Poisson's. Undetectable, it's just trickle flow. You want to detect it as much as possible. That is your job. Plaque is visible. Well, what does that mean? It's like the lumen is not visible, basically is what they're saying there. The obviously, with high or low, this is variable, and with high or low, this is variable. And then total occlusion, there's no flow is detected, visible, no detectable lumen for sure. And if there's no flow, then you cannot do ratios without the flow. So remember, and I'll use my gold colored here, this is the, let's try it again. The gold standard is going through this table and doing your best. Once again, I will remind you, this is not simple, except for in the case where there is no stenosis to look at. These are peak velocities, in other words, including peak. Well, that's right, it says right here, PSV, peak systolic velocity, in the stenosis. Plaque estimate, of course, ICA, CCA, peak systolic velocity. Usually, the CCA does not have a stenosis, so the ratio will make sense. The CCA will be traveling at a somewhat normal pace, and the ICA will be traveling at a much higher velocity if there is a stenosis, and our ratio will increase more and more. ICA, end diastolic velocity. That is still in the stenosis, Okay. Well, I think a lot of this is, how about this? I'm going to pause and see if there's anything else I want to talk about. Okay, so plaque is by far the #1 thing that we are finding in the carotid. On women, more so women, can be men, we also find another disease form, and that's, you guys say it before I say it, right? Be involved in this kind of a circumferential. If you could imagine this, it's actually it's like a rubber band is being placed along here, and then we end up getting a. Well, let's go ahead and do a little color just for fun. Let's see if I can do this without screwing it up. So if you put color on, you might see beads on a string. Actually, to tell you the truth, you will see a lot of aliasing. Well, obviously it depends what your settings are, but you may see aliasing as well. Not plaque, right? What is this, guys? Women are more likely to get it. This happens in the mid-ICA and also renal arteries are the two places that we see this, both on women. And this, of course, is fibromuscular dysplasia. Occasionally, we can find an enlarged structure. I'm going to just draw this one small, though, because let's make it green. The normal structure is right there. It can grow to pretty large size. That's a normal structure at that size, let's say. So this, and of course, when it does grow to large size, the first thing, you might not even notice the tumor as much as the vessels suddenly deviating around something. And oftentimes in ultrasound, it's a deviation in vessels that tells us there's something going on. What's that? Remember? Carotid with a Y. Well, that should give you a hint. The next word ends in a DY. Carotid body. This structure is a chemoreceptor. It's tasting the blood, literally tasting the blood, by the way. It's kind of a very similar cells to taste buds. It's tasting blood, trying to find CO2, O2, other gases. Let's see, it is also a barrel receptor. In other words, it's also testing, well, it doesn't use millimeters of mercury, that's our invention, but it's testing blood pressure. Oh gosh, I think there's one other thing, and I have to pause because I can't remember it. I think those actually are the two main things that it does. It tastes the blood. It checks our blood pressure. Why is this important? Well, if our CO2 is increased, it could affect our respiration. It could say, you need to breathe. If the millimeter mercury is decreased, like you stand up all of a sudden, the heart might beat faster. And so, yeah, so those are some of the things that the carotid body can do for us. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about, and yes, there's one thing in anatomy that I did not talk about. What goes way up here, a little higher than this, but what goes right there? The circle of Willis. Circle of Willis. So let's just talk about that really quick. If I can draw this, hopefully I can. Of course, people always draw this guy like a little alien that he is. It's a little more accurate. Oh, I forgot one guy up there. Okay. Circle of Lewis. I'll probably have to pause while I have to think about these things too. I don't want to say something incorrectly, but of course we have two vertebrals coming up. Let me jump up to here, because if it's the vertebrals we know are in the neck, what else comes up in the neck to feed the brain? The ICA. Kind of comes up like that. And then I'll continue out with the MCA. MCAs, middle cerebral artery. Okay, let's jump back down to the vertebrals. They join in the back of the, in the neck, just below the skull. Goes into the occiput. This is the basilar artery. This one is the basilar artery. And then we have different sections, and we're not going to worry about the different sections right now. We'll only to worry about the posterior cerebral artery. PCAs, yes, PCAs. And you know what? I'm going to pause and make sure I don't make any mistakes here. Oh boy, I hope I didn't just hit stop record before I hit pause. That means it would be two different videos, which would really upset me. Anyway, I really didn't need to stop. I was doing just fine. So PCA is a short term for that. Let's use a different color here. This guy coming up, and there's other arteries, but we're just worried about the main ones. Posterior artery. So it's communicating. It's communicating with kind of the middle to the back. That is PCOA is the for that. Now you would think this would be the anterior communicating artery, but it's not. So don't forget I said that. It is the anterior cerebral artery, CA. And the tiniest artery of them all, that is the anterior. Yeah, that's what I meant. Artery, or ACOA. Let's see, did I get them all? Vert, basilar, PCA, PCOA, that one, and then that one. MCA is coming out, but it's mostly created by the ICA, which kind of comes up from the neck here. We don't typically draw it all in because it just gets too messy. ACA anterior cerebral artery and a anterior communicating artery. Cool. And of course, the circle of Willis is why some people with major arterial problems still survive, because it's designed as a fail-safe. By the way, one last thing and then I'm done. So with a subclavian steel, let's say it's on the left side again, blood comes up and down. A complete steel, it just does that constantly, or throughout the cycle, I should say. And a partial steel, it does that only during peak systole. And then the rest of the cycle, the blood travels somewhat normally. Okay. I think I'm done. I'm happy with this. This is going to help you with a homework assignment. What's the homework assignment called? It's actually a test, but it's a homework. So it is called, hold on here. Curiously enough, it's called Carotid, which is what we've been talking about. So as you can see on the screen, currently 31 questions. And you'll have plenty of time to do this, and it will be a homework assignment. So that's it. All right, guys, I will be signing out.